Hey, Zach, thanks so much for talking to me today. For those who are new to the channel, Zach is one of the players that we absolutely love to follow throughout the challenge series. Zach, you always have this habit of bringing something kind of off the wall, something kind of unique. We know that you take deck building seriously, preparing for the meta, so really excited to talk about what you have prepared for the challenge here.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. This is probably the most normal deck that I've played, but yeah, it still definitely won't be one of the top represented decks by any means.
Oh, that's awesome. So I know that, well, before I ask about your deck, I do want to ask about your prep a little bit, because I know you take preparation seriously. And the fact that you come up with some like kind of off the wall things, I know that a lot of testing has gone into that, and you have reasons, like pretty deliberate reasons for why you make those choices. So how did you go about prepping for the North American Championship?
This one's a little more difficult because there's not a lot to draw from. Like when you're going from DLC to DLC, you kind of know what to expect in a month based off that, but we really don't have many big tournaments at all with this set to look at. But yeah, I'm just doing my normal stuff, making my testing process as difficult as possible. I sent you a screenshot of where it showed that I have been doing every single game on the draw. So like I'm making my testing as hard as possible, because if it's going to be hard in the testing, like it'll just be easier when I get to the actual tournament, because I'm not going to have to go second every single game. And I'm doing that to make sure my deck can win on the draw, playing as many games as possible, targeting all the specific matchups. So just doing all the normal stuff, basically.
That's so fun. So plenty of games, and then yeah, going on the draw every time. It must feel like a breath of fresh air when you get to go on the play. It reminds me of some like runners or swimmers who like strap weight on themselves and then practice with that, and as soon as they take it off, they're like, wow, this is easy.
Yeah, exactly.
So going into the challenge, you've settled here on this Amethyst Steel deck, which I'm super excited to talk about. Why did you settle on this color pairing?
So it's one that I'm pretty known for playing it. This and Steel Song are probably the two decks I played the most. I really love it, and it was basically dead last set, it felt like, but it gained so many new tools now that I feel is really strong. And there's like three main reasons probably I would say that I'm on Amethyst Steel right now. One being that, like I said, it's just super consistent. With Steel Song, I live and die by the Whole New World. If I don't get that card, I lose. Whereas with this, about a third of my deck can draw a card. I can count on it to do the same thing every time. So that consistency is one major thing. Another is that I feel like I'm favored on the play against every single deck. But I feel like this is probably the best deck to have when you're on the draw, because you have cards like Calhoun, like Strength of a Raging Fire, like Fox and Crab. So they really help you stabilize and catch up when you're on the draw. So I feel really good on the play, and then I have the best tools to be able to come back when I'm on the draw. And then third would be that it doesn't have any like amazing or bad matchups. Like there's no really good matchups and there's no really bad ones. It's pretty much 50-50 across the board. So I have the tools to be able to fight in every single matchup. So that makes me feel really good too.
That's interesting. So let's talk about matchups. How do you see the meta shaping up for this championship? I know you said it's hard to predict, but what are you expecting going in to see?
Yeah, this one's definitely the hardest to predict compared to the challenges in the past. But I think there's going to be a lot of Ruby Sapphire, a lot of Ruby Amethyst. So lots of Ruby going to be coming in there. I know that Steel Song's been split lately. I would feel shocked if we see the Diggy Diggy Hole variant, the aggro Steel Song, if we see it very popular. I think it will be pretty popular in the LCQ, but honestly, I'm not sure that the power level is there on the deck. I'm not super impressed with it. I think that traditional Steel Song is better, even though, yeah, it has a harder Ruby Sapphire matchup, but against the rest of the field, like I think it's much better. So I think lots of Ruby decks, the traditional Steel Song, I would think would be more popular in the main event, but we'll see. Some Amethyst Emerald and some Amethyst Steel, of course. I think we'll see a little bit of everything. This format is really open. It's the most open a format's been since set 3, when you could play so many different decks and be successful. So it's really going to be really exciting to watch.
Yeah, that makes it intimidating as a player, I'm sure. It also makes it intimidating as a commentator, I have to say. So a lot more prep on my end as well. But back to the matchups piece. So you said everything's about 50-50 and you expect to see plenty of Ruby Sapphire, Ruby Amethyst going in, a couple other color combinations, some traditional Steel Song perhaps. Which matchups are you least excited to see with this deck, and why?
So Ruby Sapphire, because I think I'm going to win on the play every single time, and then on the draw it's just such a slugfest. Like, it's so hard. And that's pretty much for every deck. Every deck is really good into them when they're on the play, and then like Ruby Sapphire is so good when they're on the play. So I don't really want to face that too many times. And then the traditional Steel Song can be hard too, for a lot of the same reasons, where I'm pretty much going to beat them every time I'm on the play, but when they draw the nuts when they're on the play, it's just hard for anything to beat them. So it's not really a different answer for any other deck going into those matchups, but it's the same for me, and those are the two I would least like to see.
And which matchups do you feel particularly good against?
So I do like my Ruby Amethyst matchup quite a bit, because Strength of Raging Fire is really, really good against them. And I have like eight goats essentially, because I have 4 rows and 4 goat, whereas they have the 4 goats. I just feel like I match up pretty well into that. And then Emerald Amethyst, I feel really, really good against. Calhoun is so good against them. I have, again, Strength of Raging Fire is a huge piece. And they have Ursula too to get my songs. But I've constructed my deck in a way that, like, for example, I'm not running Friends on the other side. So they're incentivized to play Ursula because my songs are so powerful. But when they do play it, it's going to miss most of the time. So yeah, my stuff just lines up really well into that matchup.
Getting into specific cards then, and looking at your deck list, let's talk about Strength of Raging Fire first, because you mentioned that quite a few times. Yeah. Why is that card so important, and what does it do? I mean, it's removal, you know, especially if you have a wide board, but why is it so important to you in this deck, and particularly in the matchups that you mentioned, and what are you looking to target with it to interrupt your opponent's game plan? So
yeah, Strength is the corner piece of the deck. I feel like it's the only reason the deck is good, to be honest with you. I would not play the deck without it. Yep, I absolutely wouldn't play it without it. Whereas a lot of people are playing like Fire the Cannons and such in the deck, which is fine, but that's really terrible against Ruby Sapphire. But Strength of a Raging Fire, like I was talking about on the draw, it catches you up so easily. So think about, say your opponent plays, they're ahead of you, so they'll get Genie on turn 4 before you. So they're always a turn ahead. They play their Genie on turn 4. You have a 1, 2, and 3 drop on the field. Now you drop your Genie. Now you use your 3 drop to sing Strength and kill their Genie. So now you've just taken the lead. So it's really good in the Genie Wars, which is what the format's a lot about right now. And it's just a song. Being for free is incredible, and it's inkable. So everything about it's really good.
So the Genie War, and I'll talk about that in a second, but the Genie War, the Genie sub-game, you say is one of the big reasons that this deck is perhaps favored into other Amethyst pairings.
Yeah, definitely. Strength, like I said, only reason to play the deck for me right now is really, really important.
So yeah, I do want to ask about some other cards, but since you mentioned kind of the Genie subgame, you know, I've been talking to other players, and there's other people who've described the meta to me as, you know, there's a couple of the traditional decks. You know, you do have Ruby Sapphire and Steel Song kind of out there, but other than that, it's an Amethyst meta, largely because of Genie and a few other cards. And the Amethyst core tends to be the same for each one of these decks, with a few variations. And then what people are doing is trying to figure out which other color to match with it, whether it's Emerald or Steel or perhaps Ruby, are the 3 that we usually see. No Amber yet. One day, but so out of if that's the case, and you know a lot of people are running the same, you know, Amethyst core, just to beat a dead horse here, it's the Strength of Raging Fire, and perhaps maybe even the Zeus, you think, that gives Steel the edge in those Amethyst matchups.
Yeah, I would say so. If you look at the list, you'll notice one Amethyst card that everyone's playing for the Genie Wars that I don't currently have in there, which is the Bell. I believe it's Accomplished Mystic is the other name. But yeah, so I don't have any Bells in there currently. And I think it was an amazing play in the European Championships, and I think it loses a lot of power when it's like so expected. Everyone knows it's coming, so everyone's playing around it. And I do think it's really strong, and it might end up in my deck before the tournament starts. But yeah, it's lacking right now because I have so many other answers, and I think it lost strength with people expecting it now.
Yeah, it's funny. During my prep, I was talking to somebody else about Steel Song and actually the Diggy Diggy Hole matchup, and talking about the importance of Rapunzel for the card draw. And they were like, look, in a pool of experienced players, Rapunzel becomes worse. You know, anything that requires a setup like that, it requires your opponent to cooperate. In a field as talented as that we're going to see in the North American Championships, it's just a worse card. And so Bell seems to fall in that same category, perhaps.
Exactly. Yeah, that's such a great comparison. Yeah, Rapunzel is really, really good day 1 of the DLC, and then day 2 is like, wow, my Rapunzels don't work anymore. So it's the same thing for Accomplished Mystic.
So we've got your deck list here. You're right, don't see the Accomplished Mystics. And there's another card I want to ask about later, but let's break it down and talk about your game plan. So I know that your game plan obviously is going to differ going into different matchups against different decks. But let's say against going in the blind, what are you looking to do? What does your first 4 turns look like?
So it depends on if I'm on the play or the draw for sure. But generally, so if I'm on the play, I'm trying to go obviously a 1-drop. And the great thing about Amethyst still is it has the 2 best 2-drops in the game. So you have Calhoun and you have Smee. They're the 2 best 2-drops, period. So you have 8 copies. So you're more than likely going to hit one of those. Then you've got some amazing 3-drops like White Rose. You're never upset to play that on turn 3. So on the play, that would be the go-to on turn 3. And then turn 4, if you're on the play, Genie. Sometimes on the draw, Genie. But yeah, so you've really got it set up. Like, it's just so consistent. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then when you're on the draw, you'll vary based on the matchup. Like Crab, Fox, and Pete are really, really good on the draw. So let's go with, like, say Pete against Steelsong. They'll play Ariel on turn 3. Now you play your Pete. Now they can't play any songs. And then next turn you use Strength of a Raging Fire to kill their Ariel. So this is a strategy I've been using in Amethyst Steel since last set. You use Pete, and then after you've locked them up with Pete, you use Strength to start dismantling their board. It's a deck I almost played in Vegas because of the Pete Strength combo. And then Fox and Crab are just incredible at catching you up when you're on the draw as well. So yeah, it depends on if you're on the play or on the draw, but it does really good, consistent things both ways.
So basically, I mean, overall, looking to build your board state, and then against certain decks, you're looking for those combo pieces, like the Pete Strength combo. Yep. Yeah, interesting. So let's say the game goes long, especially, and it's liable to against, Ruby Amethyst or Ruby Sapphire against these control decks. What does your mid game and your late game look like?
Yeah, so again, it varies on the matchup and different matchup dynamics throughout the games. Whereas against like Ruby Sapphire, you're trying to go as fast as you can. Against other decks, you're just trying to grind them out. So it can really depend. Yeah, it's really hard to say in general because it's very dependent on the context of the current game.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Fair points. So let me ask then. So let's say you're against a control deck and you've gotten, let's say Ruby Sapphire, or even Ruby Amethyst. They've gotten Ruby's unlocked their board clears, their control, their control cards. Turn 7 or so. They're able to kind of clear the board and control the board a bit. How are you closing the game out? And trying to get that last, perhaps, 6 or 7 lore?
Yeah, that's a good question. So against the Ruby decks, you have to be very careful that you don't overcommit. Be prepared, obviously, has been a menace since set 1. You can't overcommit into it. You need to, I've told you this before, like you need to make sure, you need to force them into playing it, because if you don't play enough characters and such, then they'll just pick you off with Medusas and they'll just win the board and they don't need to be prepared. So you need to put enough to where you're forcing them to do it, but you have to have enough resources back to where you can recover when they do. So it's about walking that fine line there. And against mostly Ruby Sapphire as well, they have the big Sisu where you have to vary your board. Like I can't just play 3 Genies and some Brooms and other characters like that. I have to have Calhouns and Smees and Goats, stuff that doesn't just die instantly to Sisu. So it's really about managing your board state to where they can't punish you too hard. And then as far as closing the game, we have 8 goats. We have 4 rows and we have 4 goats, and we have all the bounce. Pete's really, really good at helping close out games. Play a bunch of characters besides Pete, and then probably not going to be able to stop you. This deck's really good at closing out games.
Yeah, I love hearing the White Rose described as another 4 goats. Because yeah, playing Emerald Amethyst for so long, Goat was the only thing that made that deck viable. Yep. There were other things you could use in the late game to kind of squeeze out a lore here and there, drop some characters, but really without the goats, that deck doesn't go. And so getting the White Rose really, especially with, paired with some bounce stuff, really, really helps. Yeah. You do have another card here for the end game in this current list, and I know it could change before this weekend, but in this current list, you're running 1 Tinkerbell. Why?
So it's really like a little bit of top end goes a long way sometimes with these decks. The upside of Tinkerbell is really, really high. If your opponent, like say it's Emerald Amethyst, for example, like you're talking about, if they slap down a couple Curse Merfolks and a Chernabog, and they think they're about to quest for a bunch, and now you put down the Tinkerbell and you kill them all because they only had one strength. And then, of course, the threat of her being on the board can really freeze them from questing. So the upside on her is really, really high. I don't necessarily want more than one. One's really good. I don't want to see two in a game usually, mainly because I'm trying to be more aggressive. But just having that control option is really, really helpful as well when you need it. And then there's like a lot of key interactions that happen. Like say you have an exerted crab, for example, and your opponent uses big Sisu to kill it because they're trying to slow you down. Now that Sisu has one health left. So now you play Tinkerbell and you clear it out. So there's a lot of different key interactions that I've kind of seen throughout my testing. So the upside on her is just really, really high. So I think she's worth the inclusion.
Okay. I think it's a fun inclusion. It was great in set one. It's still great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So going back to the mid game a little bit, I want to revisit the genies real quick. You mentioned strength as a key card in there. You also have Elsa's you're running. So if you're playing another Amethyst deck, regardless of the pairing, and you know you're coming into turn 4, the genie's there. Let's say on the draw, because on the play you're probably trying to drop the genie first, and if
definitely.
you're correct me if I'm wrong, but on the draw, how are you preparing for the genie wars?
So that is a fantastic question. A lot of players are too scared to play genie on 4 on the draw because they think, and rightfully so, if your opponent already has genie, then they play Elsa and take out your genie. But it's not necessarily like it doesn't stop there. If you have an Elsa in your hand as well, now you rush in and kill their genie and you equalize. So you got to think a little bit further. And then sometimes, depending on the hand context, you just have to go for it anyways and hope they don't have it. But then I play like Zeus and Strength and stuff to help when I'm on the draw in the Genie Wars. So you're still going to be playing Genie on turn 4 a lot of times. Don't get too scared to do it. Yes, there's a lot of times I'll play Rabbit instead, but don't be too scared to play Genie on 4 when you're on the draw.
That's awesome. Because I do think a lot of people are. I think people get focused on the Genie sub game and they know that combo's there and they're like, all right, that's my opponent's plan. They know I'm going to drop it on the draw after their Genie. Elsa's going to come down, take out my Genie. That's my opponent's plan. And then not think that extra step. They're like, okay, well, fine, but that'll also be my plan. And then here's my response.
Exactly. If you have an Elsa to respond, like you just equalized it, so it's not as bad as you might think. It can be for sure, but there's sometimes you just do it anyway.
Zach, one card that I've been pretty impressed with, watching people play and testing a little bit myself, is the 1-drop Diablo. How impressed are you with that card this set? Yeah,
I love this 1-cost Diablo. It's another huge addition for this deck too. Now we can play 8 cantrips, if you will. Cantrip as in it replaces itself. You draw a card when it dies. It's fantastic because it's really good on turn 1 and it's really good on turn 8 because you're never punished to play it. You draw a card no matter what when it's banished. And it's fantastic with crab. When you crab your Diablo and kill something with it, you draw a card when your Diablo dies. And it's just insane value. So really, really love this new Diablo card.
So Zach, you talked a lot about the card draw in this deck. You're running, 3 rabbits and 4 genies for your mid-game card draw. Another card that came out recently that we see used in some decks, we see it a lot in the Diggy Diggy Hole variant of the Amber Steel decks, is Dock. Dock is a card that when you play it, you discard your whole hand and then draw 2 cards. Why not run that in this deck?
I really love the grindy nature of Rabbit. With Dock, you're dumping your hand. Like it can be really awkward if it's in your hand and you don't want to get rid of your cards. I love that Rabbit's just always good to play. It always does the same thing. You don't have to worry about discarding your hand. Whereas Dock, maybe you don't want to discard your hand. And then another important thing is I play 2 Zeus. Rabbit is the perfect Zeus singer. I play Rabbit on turn 4. They're not super threatened by it, and now I sing Zeus and blow up their genie or something. So it works fantastic with Zeus. And I just think it's better into the Ruby matchups. You might think that Dock is better because it's faster, because you empty your hand and just draw more cards. But I actually think Rabbit is better into the Ruby matchups. It's just grindier unless you keep your hand. So I just think Rabbit's better, personally.
So Zach, Amethyst Steel is a color combo that you've been playing for a long time. In fact, I think one of the first big tournaments we saw you win was Charlie's tournament, where you took an Amethyst Steel deck all the way to the top, surprised everybody. I think a lot of people tried to play it and couldn't play your variant, me included. But I know this is a color combo that's near and dear to your heart, but you haven't played it in any challenges yet. Why is it good now? What cards came out that unleashed the potential of this deck to the point that you are going to carry it potentially into the North American Championship?
Yeah, so you're right. I played it in the Charlie's Collectible 8K, which was the largest Lorcana tournament ever at the time. So top 4 there, and I played it in Atlanta at the very first DLC. So it was really, really good in set 3. But as more cards got printed in set 4 and 5, like, it didn't get anything new. So its power level fell significantly to the point where it was basically unplayable at a big competitive event in set 5. But gaining Genie, gaining Calhoun, Diablo, like, it gained some of the best cards in the new set. And the fact that Elsa is so important in the meta now, and you can play Elsa in the deck, I just think it gained so much from this set. The power level got boosted so much. So, and it's just so consistent. So I think it's incredible. I really love the deck. So happy to be bringing it now, hopefully.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much for talking to me, Zach. Best of luck this weekend.
Thank you so much.